He picked up a runaway boy at a bus station and offered him a warm meal. Hours later, the boy's mother arrived with the police, accusing him of kidnapping. She had no idea that his single act of kindness had just touched a secret that could shatter her entire world. What would you have done if you were in his place? Elias Thorne understood the language of silence. It was the dialect of his chosen life, spoken in the rustle of autumn leaves, skittering across the university quad, and the gentle hum of the industrial mower in the pre-dawn quiet. His hands, calloused and mapped with the fine lines of honest labour, knew the heft of a shovel and the delicate resistance of a rosebush to the shears. This was a tangible world, a world of soil and sunlight, a stark and welcome contrast to the one he had left behind. The old world had been one of ghosts, numbers and patterns that flickered behind screens, ethereal and yet capable of moving fortunes and toppling empires. It was a world of silent digital combat, and he had been one of its masters. Now, his battles were with encroaching crabgrass and the occasional stubborn gopher. He considered it a significant improvement. His universe had contracted to a single, fiercely protected point of light. His daughter, Lily. She was 8 years old, a creature of boundless curiosity and startling empathy, with his late wife's eyes and a smile that could disarm armies. Their life was a tapestry of small sacred routines, the precise way he cut the crusts off her sandwiches, the shared silence of reading side by side on their worn sofa, the nightly ritual of checking for monsters under the bed, a duty he performed with the utmost seriousness. This morning was like most others. The air in their small rented house smelled of coffee and toast. Elias moved with an unhurried economy, his large frame navigating the compact kitchen without a wasted motion. He packed Lily's lunch, turkey sandwich, apple slices, a single chocolate cookie wrapped in wax paper, and placed it in her backpack next to a well-loved copy of a book about constellations. "Did you remember my coloured pencils, Papa?" Lily asked, her voice still thick with sleep. She sat at the small wooden table, meticulously tying the laces on her sneakers. "The new ones, sharpest points in the 3rd grade," he replied, his own voice a low, steady rumble. He nudged a glass of orange juice toward her. He had remembered. He always remembered. The small details were the scaffolding that held their world together, and he was its vigilant architect. He saw the world through a lens of risk assessment, a habit he couldn't shake. But the risks were different now. The dangers were scraped knees, a forgotten permission slip, the fleeting sadness of a friendship squabble. These were manageable threats. Threats he could face with a bandage, a pen, or a hug. They were blessedly real. After dropping Lily at the school gate, a ritual that ended with her fiercely serious wave from the top of the steps, Elias drove his old, impeccably maintained truck to the university. The dashboard was cracked from years of sun, but the engine purred with a sound he knew as intimately as his own breathing. He was a groundskeeper, a title that felt as solid and unassuming as the earth he tended. His colleagues, mostly men older than him, with easy laughs and a shared love for the local sports team, knew him as a quiet, dependable worker. They saw a man who was good with his hands, a single father devoted to his daughter. They saw the truth, but only a single layer of it. He never spoke of the life before. He never mentioned the hushed boardrooms, the frantic calls from government agencies, the feeling of staring into a cascading abyss of code and finding the one elegant, flawed strand that could unravel it all. That man, the one they called Helios, in whispers and encrypted memos, was a ghost. Elias Thorne was the man who made sure the campus sprinklers came on at 5 in the morning. He preferred it that way. Yet, sometimes the ghost stirred. It happened late at night, after Lily was asleep, and the house was still. He would stand in his small study before a large whiteboard covered in equations. They were not for any project. They were exercises, mental calisthenics to keep the rust from settling on the gears of his mind. He would trace the familiar, beautiful logic of a cryptographic sequence, feel the old thrill of the chase, the intellectual hunt. Then, with a deep sigh, he would pick up the eraser and wipe it all away, leaving the surface clean and blank for the morning. It was a necessary exorcism. He had made a choice. He chose the scent of cut grass over the sterile chill of a server room. He chose his daughter's laughter over the silent, satisfying click of a problem solved. He had chosen peace. Eleanor Vance did not believe in peace. She believed in momentum. Peace was stagnation. It was the quiet that preceded a hostile takeover or a market collapse. Her world was one of perpetual, controlled motion, a symphony of acquisitions, strategic pivots, and shareholder reports conducted from the 40th floor of the gleaming steel and glass tower that bore her family's name. Her office was a testament to her philosophy. Minimalist, elegant, and brutally efficient, it offered a panoramic view of the city she felt she owned. There were no family photos on her desk, only a sleek tablet displaying real-time market data and a single abstract sculpture of interlocking gears. Sentimentality was a liability, a vulnerability to be exploited by competitors. Her son, Leo, was the one variable she could not fully control. He was 10, a bright but anxious boy who saw the world in questions she often lacked the time or patience to answer. He was a puzzle of a different sort, one whose logic she couldn't quite decipher. She loved him with a fierce, possessive intensity, but her love was often expressed through provision rather than presence. The best schools, the best tutors, the best of everything. These were the metrics of her maternal success. This morning, her momentum had hit a wall. It was a crisis, silent and invisible, unfolding in the digital heart of her company. A ghost. That's what her chief technology officer, a man with a 7-figure salary and a permanent expression of harried genius, had called it. A ghost algorithm was moving through their encrypted financial systems, siphoning fractions of cents from millions of transactions. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, an elegant, untraceable blade that, if left unchecked, would amount to a catastrophic hemorrhage. It's not just the money, Eleanor, Marcus, the CTO, had said, his face pale on the conference room screen. It's the access. Whoever built this can see everything. Our R&D, our acquisition strategies, everything. They own us, and we don't even know who they are. They had thrown everything at it. Their own cybersecurity team, 2 outside consulting firms with staggering hourly rates. All of them had failed. The algorithm was a phantom. It learned, it adapted, it shifted its signature the moment they got close. It was less a piece of code and more a form of artificial intelligence, a predator hunting in their digital jungle. The board was getting nervous. The quarterly report was in 2 weeks. The bleeding had to stop. Eleanor felt a cold knot of fury in her stomach. It was the feeling of powerlessness, an emotion she despised and rarely encountered. She had built an empire on the principle of control. Now, an unseen, unknown entity was making a mockery of it. "Find a solution, Marcus," she had said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I don't care what it costs. Find someone who can kill this thing." The line had gone silent, the unspoken truth hanging in the air, They had already tried everyone who was supposed to be the best. Her phone buzzed. It was a reminder from her assistant. "Pick up Leo, 3:30 p.m. She glanced at the clock. It was already 3:45. A surge of irritation, directed partly at herself and partly at the world, tightened her jaw. She grabbed her purse, her mind still churning through firewalls and encryption keys, and strode out of her office. The crisis had made her late for her own son. It was another sign of her control slipping, and she hated it. Elias had a special errand that afternoon. One of the university's more eccentric astrophysics professors had ordered a rare, out-of-print textbook, and the only bookstore that could source it was a small dusty shop downtown, not far from the Vance Innovations Tower. The professor had offered to pay Elias handsomely for the favour of picking it up. He drove his truck into the city, the familiar campus greenery, giving way to the stark geometry of the financial district. He found a parking spot and was walking toward the bookstore when he saw the boy. He was sitting on a low, polished granite wall that bordered the tower's imposing plaza. His expensive-looking backpack slumped beside him. His brow was furrowed in a mask of pure 10-year-old frustration as he stared at a math workbook. He jabbed at the page with his pencil, then let out a sigh that seemed too heavy for his small frame. Elias recognized the look. It was the face of someone hitting a logical wall. He'd seen it on the faces of brilliant colleagues and on his own, reflected in a dark monitor at 3 a.m. He felt a familiar, gentle tug of empathy. He had 20 minutes to spare before the bookstore closed for an hour. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle the boy. "Looks like a tough one," he said, his voice calm. The boy, Leo, looked up, his eyes wary. He saw a large man in a simple work shirt and faded jeans. "It's impossible," he muttered, gesturing at a problem involving prime factorization and modular arithmetic, surprisingly advanced for his age. "My tutor tried to explain it, but I don't get it." Elias glanced at the page. The old familiar language of numbers sparked something in his mind. He saw the pattern instantly, the elegant simplicity hidden beneath the intimidating notation. He sat on the wall, leaving a respectful distance. "It's not impossible," Elias said softly. "It's just a locked door. You're trying to kick it down. You just need to find the key." He didn't pick up the pencil. Instead, he started talking about numbers as if they were people. Think of prime numbers as the ones who don't like to share. They only have 2 friends, themselves and the number 1. All the other numbers are built from them. They're like the building blocks for everything. He used analogies Leo could grasp, comparing the problem to finding a secret code in a video game. He didn't give the answer. He guided the boy's own mind toward it, helping him see the structure, the inherent logic. Leo's expression shifted from frustration to fascination. He started asking questions, his pencil hovering over the page. "So it's like finding the secret ingredients?" Leo asked, his eyes wide with dawning comprehension. "Exactly," Elias confirmed with a small smile. "And once you know the ingredients, you can cook anything." At that moment, the glass doors of the Vance Tower slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Eleanor Vance emerged, her face a mask of controlled urgency. Her eyes scanned the plaza, and the sight of her son, talking to a stranger, a large, plainly dressed man, sent a jolt of ice through her veins. Every instinct, honed by a world of threats and betrayals, screamed danger. She moved quickly, her heels clicking in aggressive rhythm on the granite. "Leo." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. Leo looked up, startled. Elias stood up slowly, a gesture of non-aggression. Eleanor reached them, placing a possessive hand on her son's shoulder and pulling him behind her. She didn't look at Elias as a person. She assessed him as a threat. Worn clothes, calloused hands, an old truck parked down the street. Her mind, a machine built for snap judgments, categorized and dismissed him in a single, cold glance. He was a nobody, a potential predator. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice low and laced with steel. Her eyes were chips of ice. Elias met her gaze without flinching. His calmness seemed to infuriate her more. "Your son was struggling with his homework. I was just helping him see the pattern." "I didn't ask for your help," she snapped. She addressed her son without looking at him. "Leo, we don't talk to strangers. Talk to... Get in the car!" She was already steering him away, her grip tight on his arm. Leo looked back, a confused and apologetic expression on his face. "But Mom, he was helping me. I get it now." "Get in the car," she repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. She shot one last look at Elias, a mixture of warning and disgust. It was the look of someone swatting away an insect. Then she turned and marched toward her sleek, black sedan, her son trailing in her wake. Elias stood there for a long moment, the city's indifferent noise swirling around him. He felt no anger, only a familiar, weary sadness. He had seen that look before, in boardrooms where his ideas were dismissed because he didn't have the right degree or the right suit. It was the casual cruelty of a world that judged the book by its weathered, unassuming cover. He watched the black car pull away from the curb and disappear into traffic. He sighed, checked his watch, and turned to walk toward the bookstore. He had a textbook to pick up. Inside the car, the silence was thick with Eleanor's anger and Leo's confusion. He held his workbook, the once impossible problem, now looking clear and solvable. His mother hadn't even let him say thank you. "Mum, he was nice," Leo said quietly. "He explained it better than Mr. Abernathy." "He was a stranger, Leo. You don't know what he wanted," Eleanor said, her eyes fixed on the road. In her mind, the man was already forgotten, another piece of unpleasant urban grit washed away by the forward momentum of her life. She was already thinking about the ghost algorithm, the real threat. The irony of the moment, thick and palpable in the air around her, was entirely lost on her. She had just dismissed the one man on the planet who might hold the key. Back on the 40th floor, the atmosphere was funereal. Marcus and his team were gathered in the main conference room, their faces illuminated by the glow of a massive screen displaying cascading lines of meaningless data. They looked like men who had been awake for 3 days, running on caffeine and desperation. "Anything?" Eleanor asked as she walked in. It was a token question. The answer was written on their exhausted faces. "It's worse," Marcus said, rubbing his eyes. "It's adapting in real time now. We tried to isolate the servers it's hitting, and it just migrated. It's like a drop of mercury. You try to pin it down, and it just scatters and reforms somewhere else. It's mocking us." He brought up a visualization of the company's network architecture. It looked like a complex galaxy of nodes and pathways, and moving through it was a single, pulsing red light, the ghost. It moved with an unnatural intelligence, never triggering any of the standard security protocols. It knew their defenses better than they did. "This isn't just good coding, Eleanor," another analyst, a young woman named Chen, chimed in. Her voice was strained. "This is art. It's philosophically different from any exploit I've ever seen. It doesn't break locks. It persuades them to open." Eleanor stared at the red pulse. It felt personal now. A violation. What about its origins? Can we trace its signature? Marcus shook his head. There is no signature. It mimics the credentials of whatever system it's in. As far as our network is concerned, it's a legitimate process. It's a perfect parasite. He sighed, a sound of profound defeat. We need a different kind of thinker. We need a ghost to catch a ghost. The room fell silent, the weight of their collective failure pressing down. They were at a dead end. The best minds, the most advanced technology, all of it was useless. It was Chen, the young analyst, who broke the silence. She had been tasked with a deep dive into the company's archives, looking for anything, any old protocol or forgotten defense system that might offer a clue. There's something, she said hesitantly, as if afraid to offer a sliver of hope that might be instantly extinguished. What is it? Eleanor's voice was sharp. Years ago, before we acquired Omnicore, they had a similar problem. A major breach attempt. According to the internal report, their entire system was on the verge of collapse. Chen tapped a few keys, and an old, digitized document appeared on the main screen. It was a dry, technical after-action report from over a decade ago. They brought in an outside consultant. Chen continued, scrolling through the text. A cryptographer. He worked for them for 72 hours. He didn't just patch the breach. He built an entirely new security architecture from the ground up. An architecture that learned. It was revolutionary. The report says the system was never breached again. Who was he? Eleanor asked, leaning forward. What's his name? Get him on the phone. Chen's expression was troubled. That's the problem. He's not a person. He's a legend. He only worked under a pseudonym, Helios. Like the sun god, who sees everything. He had no company, no public profile. He took on impossible jobs, solved them, and then vanished. According to these notes, he insisted on being paid in untraceable bearer bonds and stipulated that his real name never be entered into any official record. The hope in the room deflated. So he's a myth, Marcus said flatly. That's not helpful. Wait, Chen said, her eyes scanning the document. There's an addendum, a handwritten note from Omnicore's old CEO, scanned into the file. It's informal. She magnified the note. The handwriting was a barely legible scrawl. It read, Helios saved us. The man is a miracle worker. If the world ever ends, the only name you need is Elias Thorne. The name hung in the air, Elias Thorne. It was solid, real. Find him, Eleanor commanded, a surge of adrenaline cutting through her exhaustion. I want every piece of information you can find on an Elias Thorne, with a background in cryptography or advanced mathematics. Use every resource we have. I want to know where he is, what he's doing, and I want him in this office by morning. The search was frantic and for hours deeply frustrating. The digital trail for Elias Thorne, the cryptographer, went cold over 8 years ago. There were academic papers from his youth that were still cited, patents for encryption algorithms that had become industry standards, and then nothing. It was as if he had deliberately erased himself from the digital world he once ruled. Finally, a junior HR analyst, using a deep background subscription service that scraped public records, found a match. It was a W-2 form, a tax record, for an Elias Thorne, social security number matching the one on file from his old, defunct consulting firm. The address was local. The employer was listed as Northgate University. The job title was Grounds and Maintenance Supervisor. The information was so incongruous, so utterly bizarre, that for a moment, everyone in the room assumed it was a mistake. A different Elias Thorne. "That's impossible," Marcus scoffed. "The man who designed the Cerberus protocol is not mowing lawns. Pull up a driver's license photo." A moment later, an image filled the screen. A man with calm, steady eyes and a face that looked like it had spent more time in the sun than in front of a computer screen. He looked older than in the few academic photos they'd found, but it was undeniably him. Eleanor stared at the face. Her blood ran cold. The world tilted on its axis. It couldn't be. It was the man from the plaza. The man in the faded work shirt she had treated with such contempt. The man who had been patiently explaining prime factorization to her son. The memory of her own dismissive words, her icy glare, her arrogant certainty, crashed down on her with physical force. She felt a hot flush of shame so intense it made her dizzy. The man she had identified as a threat was the one person who could save her. The key she had been desperately searching for had been sitting on a granite wall right outside her door, and she had thrown it away. "Get me a car," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "Now!" The drive to the university campus was a torment of self-recrimination for Eleanor. She sat in the back of her town car, her security chief, a stoic man named Harris, in the passenger seat. She replayed the scene in the plaza over and over in her mind. His quiet dignity, her reflexive disdain, the look of confusion on her son's face. She had been so sure of her judgment, so confident in her ability to assess a person's worth in a single glance. That confidence now lay in ruins. Her worldview, a rigid structure built on status and power, had developed a catastrophic crack. They found him near the university's botanical gardens. He was on his knees, carefully tending to a bed of fragile-looking flowers, his large hands surprisingly gentle. The late afternoon sun cast a long shadow behind him. He looked peaceful, utterly at home in his world of soil and petals. The sight was so at odds with the legendary ghost hunter she had been chasing that it caused another wave of disorientation. She got out of the car, her expensive shoes sinking slightly into the soft turf. She felt like an intruder, a creature from another harsher world. Harris stayed by the car, a silent, watchful presence. Elias must have heard her approach. He finished patting the soil around the base of a plant before looking up. He didn't stand immediately. His eyes met hers, and there was no surprise in them, no anger, just a quiet, weary recognition. Eerie. It was that lack of reaction that unnerved her the most. It was as if he had been expecting her. She walked closer, stopping a few feet away. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming jasmine. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice sounding stiff and unnatural in the quiet garden. He rose to his feet, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. He was taller than she remembered. "Miss Vance," he replied, his tone even. The moment stretched. This was the part she had been dreading. The apology. It was an act she was unpracticed in, a currency she rarely dealt. I came to apologize," she said, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. "My behavior this afternoon was unacceptable. I misjudged you, and I am truly sorry." He simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. He was waiting. He knew this wasn't just a social call. She took a breath, forcing herself to be vulnerable, to admit need. "I also came to ask for your help. My company is in serious trouble. We have a problem that no one can solve." She explained the situation, the ghost algorithm, the untraceable breach, the imminent disaster. She laid her company's life at the feet of the man she had dismissed as a vagrant. Elias listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, a long silence fell between them, broken only by the distant chime of the campus clock tower. "I don't do that anymore," he said finally. His voice was quiet but firm. It was the most resolute refusal she had ever heard. "We can pay you anything you want," she said, the desperation creeping into her voice. It was her default solution, the one that always worked. He gave a small, sad smile. It was never about the money. He looked past her, toward the setting sun. "I left that world for a reason, Miss Vance. It's a world of ghosts, of lies wrapped in code. It takes things from you, things you can't get back." He paused, and his gaze seemed to turn inward. "I have a daughter. My life is here now. It's real. I won't risk that. I can't." His refusal was absolute, built on a foundation of personal conviction that her wealth and power could not touch. For the first time, Eleanor Vance was faced with a problem that money could not solve. She felt a rising tide of panic. He was her only hope. "My son," she said, the words coming out in a rush, a last desperate gambit. It wasn't a tactic, it was the truth. "Leo, he's a good kid. He's sensitive. He worries. He knows something is wrong. This company, it's his future. It's all I have to give him." She wasn't a CEO pleading for her company anymore. She was a mother pleading for her child's security. Elias's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for a moment, he didn't see the titan of industry. He saw another parent, terrified of failing their child. He thought of Lily. He thought of the promises he had made to himself, to her, to the memory of his wife. The promise of a stable, safe life. What was that life worth if he stood by and watched another family's world crumble when he had the power to prevent it? The right thing to do. It was a simple compass, but it had never led him astray. He let out a long, slow breath, the sigh of a man reluctantly agreeing to step back into a world he had fought so hard to escape. "One night," he said, "I'll look at the data. That's all I can promise." He said his terms quickly, decisively. "No money, no contract. My name is not to appear on any report. When this is over, it's over. We never speak of it again." Relief washed over Eleanor so powerfully, her knees felt weak. "Thank you," she whispered. "Anything, whatever you need. Send a fully encrypted data packet to this email address," he said, pulling a worn wallet from his pocket and handing her a small, plain business card. It listed a single, heavily encrypted email provider she had never heard of. "I'll look at it tonight, after I put my daughter to bed." He turned back to his flower bed. The conversation, for him, already concluded. He knelt and resumed his work, his hands once again in the soil. He was a groundskeeper again. Eleanor stood for a moment, watching the man who held the fate of her empire in his calloused hands. Then she turned and walked back to the car, back to her world, feeling as though she had just negotiated with a foreign power, whose rules she was only beginning to understand. That evening, the Thorne household followed its comforting rhythm. Elias and Lily ate dinner at their small table, discussing her day at school. They read a chapter of their book together on the sofa. He tucked her into bed, checked for monsters, and left her door ajar just the way she liked it. Only after the house was completely still did he walk to his study. He sat down at his modest computer setup. It looked outdated, but he had built it himself. And its unassuming exterior hid formidable power. He opened the encrypted file from Vance Innovations. The data streamed onto his screen. a chaotic waterfall of numbers and symbols. To his team, Eleanor had said, it was meaningless noise. To Elias, it was a symphony. He didn't look for the threat. He listened for the dissonance, the one note that was out of the key. His fingers moved over the keyboard with a speed and grace that belied his day job. He wasn't attacking the problem. He was getting to know it, walking its perimeter, learning its language. He saw the work of a genius, a rival he could respect. The code was beautiful in its lethality, a work of predatory art. But all art has a signature, a philosophy. And the creator of this ghost algorithm had one fatal flaw: pride. The code was too perfect, too elegant. It didn't allow for the possibility of a mind that could appreciate its beauty rather than just try to destroy it. Elias didn't write a weapon. He wrote a poem. A small, simple counter-algorithm, no more than a dozen lines of code. It was a logical paradox, a Zen koan designed not to fight the ghost, but to present it with a question it couldn't answer without revealing its own nature. It was the digital equivalent of holding up a mirror. He sent the small text file in a reply to Eleanor. The body of the email contained a single sentence. Run this from the system root. It will find itself. In the Vance Innovations war room, the mood was electric with tension. Eleanor stood behind Marcus at the main terminal, her arms crossed. The entire team was assembled watching. They had received the file from the groundskeeper, a solution so small and simple it felt like an insult. "This is it?" Marcus said, looking at the dozen lines of code with disbelief. "This won't do anything. It's just a recursive loop." "Run it," Eleanor ordered, her voice betraying none of her own doubt. She was trusting the man, not the code. With a shrug of profound skepticism, Marcus copied the code and executed it. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The red pulse of the ghost algorithm continued its arrogant dance through their systems. Marcus started to shake his head. Then the red light stopped. It froze mid-path. On the screen, new lines of code began to appear, seemingly from nowhere. The ghost algorithm, snared in the perfect logic of Elias's paradox, was being forced to decompile itself, to trace its own origins step by step, all the way back to its source. A physical address in a server farm in Eastern Europe appeared on the screen, along with the credentials of the user who had launched it. It had caught itself. The room was utterly silent. No one breathed. They were staring at the screen, witnessing a miracle. They had been using hammers to try and dismantle a fortress, and Elias Thorne had simply walked up and handed it a key to its own front door. Marcus stared, his mouth agape. "My God," he whispered. "He didn't fight it. He made it surrender." Eleanor felt a wave of awe and something else, a profound, humbling respect. She looked at the simple lines of code on the screen. It was more than a solution. It was a lesson. It was a statement about a different kind of power, one that didn't rely on force, but on a deep and elegant understanding. The crisis was over. The aftermath was a quiet revolution in Eleanor's mind. The world looked different now, sharper. She started noticing things she had previously overlooked. The name of the barista who made her coffee every morning, the exhaustion in the eyes of her junior staff, the way her son would watch her, waiting for a sign of her attention. She had spent her life building walls, and a man who worked with the earth had shown her the power of finding the right key. She began asking more questions and making fewer assumptions. Her leadership style softened, becoming more collaborative, more human. Her employees noticed. Her board noticed. The company's bottom line, paradoxically, improved. A week later, she was leaving a parent-teacher conference at Leo's school when she saw him. Elias was standing near the gate, waiting for Lily, who came running out and launched herself into his arms. The pure, uncomplicated joy of the moment struck Eleanor with a force that took her breath away. It was a form of wealth she had never thought to accumulate. She waited until Lily had started chattering about her day, then approached them. She felt none of her old, commanding presence. She just felt like a parent. "Elias," she said softly. He looked up, and this time, his eyes held a glimmer of warmth. Lily looked at Eleanor with open curiosity. "Hi," Eleanor said, giving the girl a small smile. "You must be Lily." To Elias, she said, "I never got to thank you properly." "There's nothing to thank me for," he said. "You had a problem. I helped." It was that simple to him. "It was more than that," she insisted. "You taught me something." She glanced at Leo, who was now walking toward them from the school building, his own backpack slung over his shoulder. He saw Elias and his face lit up. "It's the math magician," Leo exclaimed, running over. Elias chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. Lily giggled. For a moment, they were just four people standing outside a school on a sunny afternoon. The corporate tower, the ghost algorithm, the world of high-stakes conflict, it all felt a million miles away. "Leo hasn't stopped talking about it," Eleanor said, a genuine smile touching her lips. "He thinks you know everything." "Only about the important things," Elias replied, ruffling Lily's hair, "like coloured pencils and prime numbers." An idea occurred to Eleanor, simple and uncalculated. "I owe you a coffee," she said. "Or dinner. No business, just a thank you, from one parent to another." Elias looked at her, then at Leo and Lily, who were already comparing notes on their respective teachers. He saw the change in her. The hard, brittle shell was gone, replaced by something softer, more authentic. He had chosen peace, but perhaps a small, quiet connection wasn't a violation of that peace. Perhaps it was an extension of it. "I'd like that," he said. "A simple acceptance. Kindness is not a transaction. It is a quiet force, like the turning of the earth, or the slow, inexorable growth of a tree." Elias Thorne had offered it without expectation of reward, and in doing so, had reminded a world of power and ambition that the greatest strength is often found in the gentlest hands. He sought no recognition, no return to his old life. He had already won the only prize that mattered. He had his daughter's hand in his, a clear conscience, and a peaceful sky above him. Some men build empires of glass and steel. Others cultivate gardens. And it is the gardeners who understand that the things that truly last are the ones that are tended with patience, with humility, and with love.